Welcome to another segment of the Grassy Knoll. We're recording this on March 30th, 2005. And we have with us, and I would say somewhat bittersweetly, Philip and Paul Collins, who are doing their 10th and final part in this series we've entitled The Magicians of Mutability. This is Vyzygoth, and we have Phil and Paul on the line. Hello, fellas.
Hi there, Viz. Thanks for having us.
No problem. I'm going to do this one time and one time only. The title of this particular segment is actually based on an article, I guess, Phil, you wrote. It's called Immanentizing the Eschaton, the Gnostic Myth of Darwinism and Socio-Political Utopianism. And we're going to have you discuss that and also any loose ends in this series finale. So you want to run with it? Go ahead.
Sure thing. Well, basically, immanentizing the eschaton is basically a Gnostic concept. The idea is that essentially on the ontological plane of this existence, of this physical universe, the eschaton, or the end, which is basically Eden recreated, or paradise, can be realized. And this was essentially the overall goal of every single scientific dictatorship that has come into existence throughout history, whether it was the Nazi scientific dictatorship or communist Russia, and it remains the goal today of the supranational elite that are attempting to establish a world government today. They want to immanentize the eschaton on this physical plane of existence. The concept is Gnostic, and one of the most prevalent symptoms of a cultural revival of Gnosticism in society right now is pretty much evidenced by the publication of the Da Vinci Codes, the release of the Matrix movies, all of which are thoroughly laced with Gnosticism, the idea that essentially the physical universe is hell created by an evil god, and that we're all fettered by the demonic agents of both time and space. And essentially the human body, the corporeal physical body, according to the Gnostics, is really a prosthetic for us to master. In fact, for the elite, all matter is essentially an element for them to master, and they intend to master it through science and through particular technology. You take the word technology, an etymologic derived from the Greek word techne, which means to craft, which basically means the skillful creation of something. And so essentially through technology, they hope to skillfully create reality, or recreate reality, actually. It's a very irrational belief system, because in order for one to recreate reality, you have to assume that there are no immutable principles governing reality. You have to assume that reality is essentially analogous to an amorphous jello, if you will, a gelatinous mass, and that it can just be shaped and resculpted. But this theme goes back all throughout the various secret societies that have basically comprised the ruling class religion, whether it be Freemasonry. In Freemasonry, for instance, Manly P. Hall, in the Keys of Freemasonry, he likened man to essentially a clay vessel that could be resculpted and recreated. This is, again, Gnostic. This is a Gnostic belief. And it's also very much prevalent in none other than Darwinism. Darwinism, which is premised upon the metaphysical claim that life basically birthed itself, that non-living matter became living matter, and essentially basically attained sentience by itself. And so this doctrine of self-creation, which is a metaphysical doctrine and a religious doctrine, it leads to the Gnostic belief in self-salvation, that we will save ourselves. And that's essentially what underpins all of the elite's plans, is this contention that we will save ourselves, that we will establish heaven on earth. There's no need to wait for Jesus Christ to show up and do it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason to wait for salvation from above or any sort of divine intervention. It will be achieved through our efforts and our efforts alone.
Well, I mean, Darwinism, I think, and you tell me what you guys think, did two things. One, it, to me, dehumanized humans. If we could have the survival of the fittest applied to us like animals, then that gave basically someone imprimatur to go ahead and cull the population. And two, it did also cut God out of the whole situation, and that leads an open pathway, I think, to a lot of the occult religions about this apotheosis, and and basically the end is here.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you bring up the fact that it dehumanizes people. A Turkish Freemason, if I'm not mistaken, Master Mason, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Selami Eisendag,
okay.
Basically, he said, I think in his book Inspirations from Freemasonry, he discusses Darwinism and Freemasonry's role in the ascendancy of Darwinism. He basically says at one point, quote, "From the point of view of evolution, human beings are no different from animals. For the formation of man and his evolution, there are no special forces other than those to which animals are subjected," unquote.
And the problem with that is obvious, because if is the equivalent of a reactive animal, then you can employ almost nearly identical the same methods of domestication that you would with a cat or a dog to human society. And we really do see that kind of thing happening nowadays. We see this attempt to domesticate human beings, to make them docile by applying drugs into them, or we also see it in that's a more mild form, but we see it in a more blatant form when you look at the different devices that are used against protesters, peaceful protesters, at the different demonstrations against globalization nowadays, the so-called non-lethal weapons. These are basically the equivalent of a leash or some or an electronic collar that you would put around a dog. They're the equivalent for human society.
Yeah, and essentially, again, this whole concept again is Gnostic, because the overall contention is that the human body, the corporeal vessel that stores our soul, is essentially a prosthetic to be mastered, a prosthesis through which we can extend our powers, and through whatever means augment that prosthesis so as to guarantee longevity. Which, don't misunderstand me, I don't have a problem with a person trying to enhance the quality and even the longevity of their life, but ultimately what you'll find, particularly with a quasi-Gnostic religious movement known as transhumanism, the ultimate objective is immortality. And, of course, immortality is a characteristic, a quality that is on par with God. So, I mean, you put two and two together. Essentially, this is the age-old alchemical mandate for the transformation of man into God, and the part and parcel of that mandate is Gnostic.
Also, go ahead. All right, I'll continue. Going back to what Paul said with this behaviorism, I mean, that's perfect, because that's exactly what Dewey was pushing in American schools.
Absolutely.
And then you have the other University of Chicago types, like I believe Skinner and Bloom. And, of course, I think I've told you this. I mean, I didn't ask when I was an adult in my 40s, going back to get certified, why, when I make lesson plans, why do I have to have a behavioral objective?
Exactly.
I'm going, what? I never stopped to think, what do I care about the kid's behavior? I'm trying to teach him something.
Exactly.
Many people, when they look back to behaviorists and to the experiments that they were pulling, most of them find it to be odd and to be rather half-baked, and they don't see the larger implications in the larger outcome. You see, like the Skinner box, for instance. Mm-hmm. That was merely a microcosm of what Skinner wanted to be applied to human society. He wanted a global Skinner box. And the idea that he was just going to use this on his child, and that it just stopped there, and the experiment stopped short with little children is incorrect. He wanted the whole operant conditioning process to be applied to every single aspect of humanity, and for the Earth to become, in a sense, a global Skinner box. And you really do see this going on. You see the attempt to apply this system of rewards and punishments on the job, at school, and in areas that you would suspect, that it wouldn't be present. All of a sudden, you see these kind of methods being employed.
Also, thinking back to Huxley and all that you've just both said, the ones who are the elites are trying to sell the idea to themselves, I think, that they can be gods. What was it? How did you coin it, Philip? That they are becoming, or something like that?
Yeah, that they are in the process of becoming, the
right.
occult process of becoming. It's basically a doctrine of transformism that has surfaced throughout history under various names. Darwinism is perhaps its latest and most long-lived incarnation. For some reason, Darwinism has exhibited, as a doctrine of transformism, Darwinism has exhibited an extremely long lifespan. But there's been other doctrines of transformism throughout the ages. You have Hegel's Weltgeist. You have Nietzsche's Übermensch. All these are basically doctrines of transformism, derivative of the older occult doctrine of becoming that dates back roughly 6,000 years to Mesopotamia. And the idea is that man is an emergent deity in the process of becoming, and it kind of inverts, it inverts, for instance, the biblical view that in the beginning was God and God created all things. It inverts that view, and it holds that in the beginning there was no God, but there will be a God in the end, and that God is being birthed on this ontological plane of existence, and what basically you could call prima materia in this material plane, and essentially the view basically holds that the entire biosphere, the entire cosmos, is one enormous golem, because for those who are not familiar with Kabbalism and the Kabbalistic concept of the golem was essentially a creature birthed from non-living dead matter. And you see that very much alive today. The basic overall, for instance, the basic overall thesis governing the Gaian hypothesis, which has been touted by Lovelock and other New Agers and is adhered to by radical environmentalists and what have you, and other Mother Earth cults, holds that there is no separation between living and dead matter. And so essentially Gaia is this golem, this sentient being birthed of itself, self-created, and thus our duty is to help it assure its salvation, which again is the Gnostic concept of self-salvation. So, yeah, essentially the doctrine of transformism and these concepts have underpinned all of the elites' plans throughout all of history. And certainly, while there are political, socio-political objectives and financial objectives that the elite hold, this religious doctrine is the core philosophy that pretty much motivates it all.
And I think also that it's important to point out at this point, Viz, that what Phil just said puts the lie to the overall contention that atheism is a doctrine that is devoid of any belief in God. Atheism is not a disbelief in deity. It is a belief in emergent deity. And once people begin to wrap their heads around that these individuals, such as the Richard Dawkins types, the deceased Gould, and all these other types that are perpetuating Darwin, that these types don't disbelieve in God, but believe in the idea of an emerging God being humanity in toto, they will begin to understand and see this issue in a lot more clearer light.
Well, the other thing that seems to be, to me, to be happening along with this particular transformation is that it's got built into it this dichotomy, I think, where you have the elites believing in that apotheosis, but the rest of us are just slugs that are going to do the wet work. And I'm thinking about especially a Huxleyan type individual and a lot of the things that he had said in that speech, The Ultimate Revolution, when he says so glibly, you can learn to love your servitude.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you bring that up because, part of the alchemical mandate for the transformation of man has been eugenics, selective breeding of allegedly genetically superior stock, and facilitating of evolution, which, by the way, people who buy into evolution, you have to ask the question, if evolution were simply an axiomatic, self-evident, overarching fact, why is it that it does not assert itself and it requires humanity's assistance in its facilitation? If it were simply a natural law, it would assert itself just like gravity. But at any rate, for instance, Sir Francis Galton felt we had to facilitate evolution through eugenics and through selective breeding. But the concept of eugenics is essentially Gnostic in that again, it holds that that the human body is merely a prosthetic to be mastered, and if the eugenical apotheosis of humanity were attainable, then it would require that it would basically stipulate that certain breeds of humanity are lower than others, because if you breed humanity like pigs, then, as is the case with pigs, well, to reiterate Orwell, some pigs are more equal than others. And so certain breeds are going to have to be culled. They're going to have to be, basically, essentially phased out. And you see this way of thinking, again, in the quasi-Gnostic religious movement of transhumanism. They believe in what they call a gen-rich class, or a genetically rich class, in that essentially you and I, all the listeners, will work basically service sector jobs, wait hand and foot on this gen-rich class that will govern, socially, economically govern society. And essentially, William Sims Bainbridge, who is a transhumanist ideologue and also a sociologist, really put it kind of bluntly in one of his essays. He said, well, through chemical manipulation, drugs, and what have you, the human animal can be made more docile, which is essentially the ultimate goal. While they, as you put it, while they want to be apotheosized and want to become God, they certainly do not aspire to such an end for you or I. It's mainly for themselves.
Right.
It's also interesting, if you go back through the body of New Age literature and read it, you always see this idea of godhood being extended to the common person, and they're always offering that and holding their hand out, promising that. But then you'll see that they always refer to an elite of some sort, avatars, guided masters of some sort that are behind things that are taking humanity in these different directions. And there seems to be this idea in the New Age books, if you read them carefully, it's subtly there, that some gods are greater than other gods, and the idea that there is still going to be this elite that are superior to the rest of us. And we already see this kind of stratification taking place today. We if you look around and pay attention to what's happening, you really don't even have to do a lot of research. Just pay attention to things that are happening in your community. You'll notice this phenomena where these kids from middle class families will go into debt and will go to school and will get out with after 4 to 5 years with some kind of college degree, just to go on to work for $7 to $8 at a Target or at a Walmart or at some kind of retail outlet, whereas these elite children that go to Harvard and to Yale and whatnot, and get out and have no real talents or skills to speak of, but because of their pedigree, because of the bloodline that they belong to, they are instantly elevated to these positions that wield tremendous amounts of influence and power.
Well, a couple of things. One, I think what we're seeing now, not that you're asking me, but a cheapening of the college education.
Oh, absolutely.
Jane Jacobson, I think we might have spoken this in a prior show, called it credentializing, which I fully believe. On the other hand, I think also you're seeing the phasing out of college to a certain extent, and there may be an event, perhaps a world war or something like that facilitates it, and that is you're not going to see as many going to college. I mean, I'm looking at the expense that these kids have to go through and the whole scam with the textbook thing. I mean, I can't believe it. It's staggering. So, in other words, you're going to find less and less going to college to fit this school-to-work mentality.
Well, back when we were in high school, the two of us back in the early '90s.
Don't rub it in.
Yeah, but back when we were starting right before we got out and were going to go to college, the new debtor class, the up and coming debtor class at that time, was college students. Here, as of late, the new bankruptcy class is college students, and that they literally are breaking their backs financially to try to get ahead, and then they get out and they just can't find anything in their career field, anything that they've spent a good portion of their life's training to do. And the phenomena that you're speaking about, Philip and myself refer to as the subversion of meritocracy, where personal merit no longer stands for anything, and pedigree and bloodline and background are everything. If your last name happens to be Rockefeller or DuPont or Rothschild or some other, take your pick of any oligarchical dynasty's name and all, you're going to go a lot farther just because of that alone. And you really don't have to display any kind of special talent in any field whatsoever. There was an excellent book that came out years ago by Webster Tarpley and Anton Chaikin that went into George Bush Sr.'s background, the unauthorized biography, and they shown how Bush, when he was back in school, really didn't have any special skills and didn't display any kind of anything in the way of learning. His time was spent more at clubs and in particular at the with the Skull and Bones and lollygagging with his brothers in that strange organization and all. But even given this fact, in spite of this fact that he didn't really display any kind of talent or skill or vast education to speak of, he went on to become a United Nations ambassador. He went on to become the director of Central Intelligence. He eventually went on to hold the highest office in the land. He became the President of the United States. So, he's a prime example of this phenomena that we're speaking of, where people of merit are pushed aside, and people with the proper pedigree, people considered to be part of this oligarchical class that will come to be known as the gin-rich class, are the people that are elevated whether or not they have any skill to speak of.
I think if anyone did a genealogical study on any of our presidents, you'll find none of them related back in Europe to anybody that was a plumber.
Exactly. No, not even the best of them, if you'll notice. Even the best of them had some kind of tie back to royalty of some sort. The only one that really starts to diverge, in my opinion, was Lincoln. He had very humble beginnings, but even I think that there might have been a few blue bloods on the family tree if you go and dig back far enough.
Or, you might be right, and perhaps maybe that's one of the reasons why his life was cut short, because, we tried this experiment with somebody who's not one of us, and it's not working out real well.
Exactly, and because that man could really, if you look at his background, his first mother died. He was very poor. His father had to work really long hours to try to keep a roof over their head. He had to raise his sister all by himself, almost. He really came back from a real humble, real salt of the earth background to where when he got into office, it didn't matter that he was sitting in these nice conditions, where one could easily luxuriate in the White House. He was able to remember back, and he was able to relate to the farmer out in the field, the blacksmith, the soldier, the person that wasn't financially well-to-do and that had to work hard for what they had, and he had the ability to relate to the common person, and that shaped a lot of his policies as a result, and that does not fit into the framework for the oligarchs. As far as they're concerned, they have to keep themselves isolated from the common man, and can't begin to think of the common man in human terms. They have to be able to think of them the way that they would a beehive or an ant farm, something that's automated, something that lacks any individualism whatsoever.
You mentioned in the article a number of doctrines that those by Darwin, Marx, and by extension Engels, Hitler, and Hegel. And let me throw this out to you. I have felt that some of these individuals may not have been all that exceptional, and I'm not really so sure that any of them really birthed what they were the amanuensis of. I'm suggesting, and I'm, to me, the root of all evil is not only the love of money, but the bankers. And what I'm saying is that Europe being, I guess, more civilized or technologically advanced for its time, I can almost see a hand at work here that has to produce something that continues the idea or the goal of this one world government. And I almost wonder if the Rothschilds, let's say, or someone wasn't behind it and basically said, listen, this is what you're going to do. And or if you come out with a Mein Kampf or a Das Kapital or the Manifesto of the Communist Party. What do you guys think about that?
Well, it's interesting that you should bring that up. For instance, I've heard many philosophy scholars and what have you mention the fact that Marx was a genius or that he was a very adept economist. But it doesn't take a moron, it doesn't take a genius to tell you that Marxist economics do not work. That Marxism basically results in a stultification of the economic system because productivity begins to decline, and incentive to work is basically declines with it because nobody is allowed to keep the fruits of their labors. And so it really raises this question as to if Marx really was as smart as they say he was, then that really raises suspicions about his true goals in knowingly promoting a system that basically self-immolates, that basically destroys itself. And we do know through our research and through several historical documents that Marx was financed and was promoted by wealthier interest.
By the League of the Just, for one. The League of the Just are the people that backed his book. As a matter of fact, his book was really nothing more than an outline prepared by the League of the Just. It's also interesting to note that he really didn't really have any kind of employment to speak of, with the exception of being a journalist for a short time, and that he lived off of an inheritance that wasn't even his own. Frederick Engels had received from his family and their wealthy business. Most of these people, if they weren't propped up by somebody behind the scenes with them, with the money and with the know-how, would have probably gone on to been abject failures in life. And I'm not just speaking about Marx. There's lots of different other ideologues out there. I doubt that Darwin would have been anything if it wasn't for T.H. Huxley and even people that might doubt the idea of any kind of conspiratorial undercurrent to Darwinism, even mainstream academia, they give props to T.H. Huxley as if he was the power behind the man, so to speak, by calling him Darwin's bulldog. He was a shy Darwin, that is, was a very shy man. He failed miserably out of medical school. He didn't have any kind of degree, with the exception of, I believe, a theological degree. And it took this other man that came from an oligarchical background, Huxley, to prop him up and to basically get people to place legitimacy in what he was saying.
Yeah, if I may elaborate on that, okay. Mm-hmm. Essentially, the institution that was largely figured in very prominently in the promulgation of Darwinism was the Royal Society, which, of course, all its founding members were Freemasons. Now, certainly one could argue that the Royal Society itself was not entirely conspiratorial in character, but, that the early Royal Society members were mainly naive Baconians who believed in a relatively oversimplified epistemology of empirical science, devoid of intention, devoid of hypothesis, kind of like Newton's hypothesis non fingo. And no doubt many of the later Royal Society members fell into this category, but the Royal Society possessed an inner circle that was slightly less than altruistic, known as the X Club. And this inner circle was governed and presided over by T.H. Huxley, and it was a group of 9 men which wielded influence over almost every famous scientist in the world, as well as, and it also the inner circle was also composed of a few distinguished radicals. All of its members, with the exception of Herbert Spencer, were presidents and secretaries of learned societies. But at any rate, it's with this group that you see an active effort to basically maintain the epistemological dominance of Darwinism. For instance, you have the case of Bathybius Haeckelii, which was discovered in 1868. T.H. Huxley himself claimed to have discovered it. It was essentially a microscopic creature that he found in samples of mud removed from the North Atlantic. But essentially, he claimed that this species, this microscopic species, was the missing transitional form between inorganic matter and organic life, and that it constituted a victory for abiogenesis. Well, come to find out that it wasn't that at all. In 1875, Huxley's claim was thoroughly refuted by a chemist aboard the Her Majesty's ship, the Challenger. He proved that it was nothing more than amorphous precipitate of sulfate lime. Well, this thoroughly destroyed any veracity to Huxley's claim that and the claim of Darwinism that life began abiogenetically by itself. But through the X Club and through the powers that it wielded over the scientific press, well, surprise, surprise, nobody heard about this. Nobody heard about this revelation. And as we're still one of the pieces of literature that pushed this the idea that that there was a Monera and that basically represented a segue between organic and inorganic life in the phylogenetic tree by Ernest Haeckel, continued to be distributed and was, if I'm not mistaken, it was called the History of Creation, and it continued remained in circulation, unrevised and unabridged, in spite of the fact that there was a clear blow to the entire idea to begin with. But this is all, again, attributable to a media cartel within the British Royal Society.
Once again, this is the Grassy Knoll. This is Vyzygoth, and with us are the brothers Collins, Paul and Philip. You've heard of their books. If you've listened to any parts of these series, they are the hidden face of terrorism and the ascendancy of the scientific dictatorship. What I would like you to state, if you could, I'm getting the impression, although you'll probably still write for a number of online sources, is Conspiracy Archive more or less going to become some kind of a repository for your works?
Yeah, that's essentially basically the plan. If people go to www.conspiracyarchive/Collins.php, they'll find one of the most complete list of our articles and interviews, archived radio interviews. And so the hope is that eventually we'll be able to use that standalone page as something of an active website for a while to promote the work.
Yeah. Now the books can be purchased through Amazon, and also it's iUniverse.
iUniverse, yeah.
iUniverse. Mm-hmm. Now after 10 times, maybe you think I would have gotten that right.
Oh, hey.
But if Conspiracy Archive is going to be a place where most works will be found, I mean, I'd like to put something up on the front page too, so people can go there. So if that's going to happen, I'll put that up. And it'll make it a little simpler to find the work that right now you have in a couple of other venues, such as biped.info, Paranoia Magazine, and News with Views. When was the last time you had something come out on News with Views?
Oh, golly. News with Views, my last article, which was the alchemy of eugenics, came out January 10th.
Okay, so it's recent. All right. If we can go back into the body of your work, and I had a laugh just thinking as you guys were rolling off names. It's like all these brilliant people. Darwin, who created a system that fails. Marx created an economic system that doesn't work. Hitler creates a movement that ends up in abject torture and murder. So you got to really wonder. But this movement to socialism, and I'm thinking about this because of the utopianism that you mentioned in the article. I actually find PhDs around here, and even kids, students, who are looking at capitalism as being barbaric, and actually think that socialism, this may be the one perfect place. And like you all said before, there's no system that doesn't have an oligarchy running it. It's a human form of government, and because of that, anything that's created by them is going to wind up corrupted. So there's always this promise of utopia, but there can be no delivery.
That's very correct. And nearing the end of the ascendancy of the scientific dictatorship, we show how the global scientific dictatorship that's being installed right now just cannot work for a number of different reasons. It's obvious that the current President Bush, is very gung ho at getting this whole thing up and running and erected during his lifetime, because we see things such as the imperialistic overstretch with Afghanistan, with Iraq, with what's shaping up to be somewhere down the line a movement into Iran and into Syria. At what point that will happen, I can only speculate to. There's several problems that are causing it to fall apart. Even before it's fully up and running, and before the capstone is placed on the pyramid, so to speak. With President Bush, when he began to try to bring this dictatorship into being, using the imperialistic route laid down by Brzezinski and laid down in the documents by PNAC, the Project for the New American Century, he inflamed other factions of the elite against them, and they became angry at him. It should be noted that on May 15th of 2003, a Bilderberg meeting was convened in Versailles, France, and I'm sure, Viz, that you're very aware of what the Bilderberger meetings are, and that your audience is very much aware of what they are. They're basically meetings that have been held annually since the first meeting at the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland, in 1954. And these meetings are basically meetings meant to create harmony between the various factions of the elite and to bring about some kind of consensus. That May 15th meeting in 2003 of the Bilderberg group urged Bush to start sharing what he gained through the war on Iraq, and to start handing out some of the contracts to some of these other countries, to corporations and to businesses from other countries, so that they could go in and be part of the rebuilding process and part of the new infrastructure in Iraq. Basically, because the reason that they want those contracts is no matter how powerful it sounds that the euro, right now is gaining dominance over the dollar and whatnot. No matter how powerful, though, it sounds that Europe is becoming, the truth is that by 2050, the economy, the Europe's share of the world economy is only going to be something like 12%, compared to right now, which is something around 20%. And this came out in a study called World Trade in the 21st Century, that their share of the world economy was actually going to shrink, and they have to do something to keep that from happening. And so, these major contracts in Iraq would have certainly helped them keep their share of the economy. But we know that the Bush administration basically thumbed their nose at these European companies, and that the majority went to companies in countries that were that cooperated with the president. Many of them went to companies here in the United States. One that I can think of is the construction giant Bechtel out of San Francisco received a $680 million contract, and Cheney's Halliburton, of course, which got contracts over there. Its subsidiary Kellogg Brown and Root is now over there. It went over there to help with the oil infrastructure and to fight oil fires and whatnot. And this thumbing of our noses at the Europeans has inflamed the European elites against the elites here at home. So what we got shaping up now is oligarchical warfare between the different factions of the elite. And we see this on a daily basis almost now in the news, where Putin is now cooperating closely with the Chinese, and the French are still very, very much upset with us about the Iraq War, and are promising arms sales to countries that are hostile towards us, such as China, as a way to display their disdain for us. And in that kind of a situation where there is a war going on between the different elites, and they're fighting amongst themselves, it becomes harder and harder to control the natives, and it will become harder and harder for them to put up any kind of resistance against the political dissent on the grassroots level. And I just don't see them holding this whole thing together for much longer. It's being held together with glue and rubber bands, so to speak.
What you mentioned with this outrage that's being engendered in all other countries because of whether it's Bush's selfishness and such, I would say that what I think is happening is this is for the consumption of the masses around the world, to build this outrage against us to fuel a coming war, and that maybe now, I don't know how long it's going to last, but we could be seeing a period like pre-World War II Germany, where the financiers and the industrialists are in the building and the arming period, and then sooner or later there'll be that spark that sets the tinderbox ablaze.
I certainly would have to agree with you to an extent with that, Viz, because I can certainly see where the discontent in these other countries can actually begin to be used to the advantage of elites here at home, because you always need an enemy. You need an enemy. It's like the character of Mickey Rourke in that movie White Sands, when he portrayed a Central Intelligence Agency operative. His character says, "How are we going to keep the military-industrial complex chugging along without pit-faced, scum-sucking evil breathing down our necks?" And then he goes on to say that it's his job to keep the other side fighting, whatever side we are not officially on this year. And so I can see where the discontent, the anti-American sentiment, can actually be used by elites here at home in starting a war. War is good for the evolutionary process. It brings about what evolutionists call punctuated equilibrium, a process that was played up in a recent movie, the movie X-Men. The movie X-Men, where these superhumans come about because there's this huge leap in the evolutionary process. War can bring about, in their opinion and in their mythology, punctuated equilibrium and all. I also, though, see it, though, to their disadvantage in the respect that there has to be some harmony amongst the elites. There has to be some cohesion. And if they're mad at one another, if they're ticked off, and we see that they're mad at one another with just the last election, how bitter things got between Kerry, who was backed by Soros, and Bush, who was backed by his backers in the establishment. If you have that kind of fighting going on amongst yourselves, it's hard. It makes it harder to keep the common man in line and to keep down the rabble rousers. So there's an advantage to it, and there's a definite disadvantage.
Well, yeah, as you're saying this, I'm still thinking to myself, yeah, but I still think this is orchestrated, good guys, bad guys.
Oh, yeah.
For that war. I do think that since, and I'll make an aside later, but what I think eventually what will happen is it'll be a controlled war.
Oh, yes.
And,
yes.
And when it's over, everybody will be just one big happy family. At least the elites will. But, let me throw this out to you because I'll send you this link. Not that you can't find it, but I've been looking through a website called silver-investor.org or .com. That's what it is. I don't have it before me. It's going to be the crux of a show later on today. Harry and I, when we kick things back and forth about trying to identify who really are what we would call the oppressors central, if you know what I mean, we finally came down, and I think we're right in the sense that it's always men in suits. No matter what color of skin, no matter what generation or eon, it's always been men in suits. And on silverinvestor.com, Charles Savoy has written a 3-part series called Meet the Money Masters. And don't you think, I believe it's in the 3rd part, I'm scrolling through it, and he's got photos there. And there's a big, toothy, grinning David Rockefeller with Chou En-lai and another Chinese dignitary, and all through the years, and I'm saying to myself, these are the cats who started communism, and these are the cats who are behind China, as rogue as they may appear. What it comes down to is they're all ruled by the suits, and, what will be, but I don't think they want to blow the earth up. They just want to more or less, give humankind the greatest scare the world has ever known.
That's correct. It reminds me of something that I once heard the comedian George Carlin say. George Carlin, for all of his faults and the vulgarity and whatnot, sometimes you can actually pick some gems and nuggets out of what he says, some nuggets of wisdom. And he once said, this year, and and this year could be any year. He said, this year, doors will be closed, brandy will be poured, cigars will be lit, and the people will suffer. And it does. It goes. And what he was saying through that sarcastic remark was that it does. It goes back to these very wealthy financiers, and it always looks like it's some kind of dictatorship of the proletariat. But you know what? When you dig deep enough, when you see whose money was being funneled into these different projects, you see people that cannot in any way whatsoever be classified as part of the working class or what the Marxists referred to as the proletariat. It leads back to dynasties that have dynastical wealth that has accumulated through literally years, centuries after centuries that are comprised of people that never knew, probably at least not unless you go back far enough into their genealogies, but most of these people never knew what it was to work to work a day in their life, have known the hardship of the common person in earning a dollar.
One of the most heartfelt accounts of communism is captured by Bella Dodd. Have you ever heard of her book, School of Darkness?
Absolutely. She is the most important in pointing out that beyond the communist conspiracy, there is a larger conspiracy, because she pointed out that whenever the Communist Party hit a deadlock, a courier was sent out to a wealthy financier, and whatever that financier came up with in terms of decision, that was the direction in which they went. And so Bella Dodd was very, very much important in showing that there was a hidden face behind communism, and that you have to peel away this onion to get to the center.
Did you touch upon that in the book, The Hidden Face of Terror?
We did touch a little bit upon the influence of the rich in communism and whatnot. We didn't get an opportunity to go into to Belladad into her revelations. However, I do intend in later work to look into that and to include that, because it's just such an important it's an important revelation. Another important revelation concerning the Communist Party USA is the fact that Morris Childs, which was the number 2 man to Gus Hall, was actually in the pockets of the FBI, and that Hoover had got Hall to come to work for him because Hall had become disillusioned with what Stalin was doing in the Soviet Union, and Hoover saw to it that Childs was the one who became disillusioned, rather. Saw to it that Childs was fed this Trotskyist line that Stalin was betraying pure communism, and this got Childs into the FBI's pocket, and so there's this possibility that the party was always controlled by the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing account. If you can find that book, read it. She also kind of says that same fate befell Earl Browder before Hall, and that opened the door for Foster to get in. Once again, we're with the Collins brothers. Their books are The Hidden Face of Terrorism and The Ascendancy of the Scientific Dictatorship. Check out conspiracyarchive.com for a lot of their works. I think that this is going to become more and more of a major, I won't say movement on your behalf, because that's not what you want, become more and more of a very pertinent system of thought as we see these years, and events are happening rather quickly with this Huxleyan world, which is what brought us all together. When I read what you wrote, I'm going, all right, somebody gets it. I mean, not that I'm sitting on top of the world, but somebody finally put together a lot of these supposedly fragmentary movements throughout the centuries, and you guys seem to have caught that very well.
And that was our direct intent. Some writers write primarily for the money. I'd be lying if I didn't say that we would definitely like to make a profit so as to keep the work coming. Because basically the finances are the blood that keeps the heart pumping in this field and whatnot. But the primary the central reason for writing these kind of works is to strip away the wall of plausible denial that the elites hide behind, because when that wall is gone, then they're basically forced into a position where, in particular, the government is forced into a position where it must become receptive to its primary constituency again, which is you and I, and not the oligarchs. And it literally leads to a take back of our government away from the oligarchs into the hands of the average everyday Joe on the street again.
Well, in an email exchange yesterday from a listener out in Ohio, I forgot about it, Ohio, North Royalton, sound familiar to you?
That doesn't ring a bell offhand.
I'm sure it's not a thriving metropolis, perhaps.
No.
But anyway, a dear sister out there said, what are we to do? And I just said to her, no matter what happens, you got to stand for something. And that's why works like yours matter, because you got to be informed, you got to speak out against it, because if you don't, you're part of the evil. Philip and Paul, boy, thanks so much. It's almost teary-eyed to have to say goodbye to you guys after spending a good part of 2 months with you.
Yeah. It's been a joy, Viz.
All right, God bless you, and, of course, continue good fortune, and I'm sure we'll be talking again.
Of course.
Good night, boys.
Bye.